Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for March's Brunch and Learn. This morning, we have North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund CEO Brennan Quintus with us. Prior to being appointed to CEO, Brennan led the NDIRF's underwriting and loss control departments. Brennan holds an undergraduate degree and an MBA from University of Mary in Bismarck, and he recently obtained a law degree from Concord Law School, which is an affiliate of the Purdue University system. He also holds many insurance designations, including the Chartered Property Casualty Underwriter, or CPCU, and Certified Insurance Counselor, CIC designations. In addition to his role at NDIRF, Brennan also serves as the president of the ND Rough Rider chapter of the CPCU Society, and as an executive committee member for the NDHR Collaborative. Today, Brennan will be reviewing NDIRF's 2022 performance and will give an overview about coverage features and additional coverage tailored to school risk. During the presentation, you can post any questions you have in the Q&A feature. I will do my best to moderate them, or we will get them all answered for you at the end. So now I will leave it to Brennan.
Okay, thank you, Lexi, and good morning, everybody. First off, I've got to say, as I was waiting for our presentation to start, I was looking at the cover picture here that our fantastic marketing and communications manager here at the Reserve Fund, Joanna, put on our slideshow, and it just kind of makes you think, gosh, we've got to be close, right, to the fantastic weather that picture shows. It's like kind of like putting pictures of really good looking food on a show when you're super hungry. It's kind of where we're at right now with our winter, but hopefully it'll be here soon. So like you mentioned, I'm Brennan Quintus. I'm the CEO of the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. Before we jump into the slideshow, I just want to take a quick second to say thank you for all that you do for your schools, for our communities, and for our state. Education and schools kind of hold a soft spot in my heart. My dad was in education for many, many years, and so I know the impact that you all have on your schools and on your communities. And so I certainly appreciate all that you do, and appreciate you hopping on board today and going through a review of NDIRF coverage, our financial performance from 2022, and then we'll go through some claims and claims information that's specific to schools in North Dakota. And when we go through the claims information, we're also going to touch on some risk management tools that the NDIRF provides free of charge in most cases to all of our members. Before we jump into the meat of the presentation, I've always got to throw up our disclaimer, simply just saying we're going to go through some coverage language here in today's presentation. And of course, we're just going to talk about general concepts, and coverage will be interpreted for each individual claim situation. And so while what we talk about here is certainly relevant and true in a general context, each claim will be analyzed and handled in an individual manner. And so refer to the exact coverage documents that we've got available on NDIRF.com for specific coverage language and information that may be pertinent to a specific claim or incident that your school district may encounter. So who is the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund? We see a lot of new faces at various conferences that we attend, whether it's the School Board Association and school events, or even with our other membership groups with the League of Cities and the Association of Counties and other groups. And so we always like to give a little bit of background for those folks that might be new to the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund. Simply put, we are your coverage provider. And I'll touch on here in a few minutes kind of our origin story and why I say we're your coverage provider, but we're a member-owned organization. And so your school district, as a member of the Reserve Fund, is an owner of the Reserve Fund. And we provide a few different types of coverages to our members. First off, we provide liability coverage, and we're going to talk about some specifics with regard to our liability coverage here in a few minutes. We also provide automobile coverage. which is very similar to what you might find within the commercial insurance marketplace, or even your personal auto coverage. It covers the physical damage for vehicles. It covers liability in the event that you're involved in an auto accident. And we'll touch on some of the highlights with our auto coverage here as well. And then we also offer public assets coverage, which is kind of like an equipment or inland marine type coverage that you might find available within the traditional insurance marketplace. Now, those are our NDIRF lines of coverage. Back in 2019, we also took on a few different other coverage lines through a contract with the North Dakota Insurance Department, or the state of North Dakota. And that would include property coverage. So your fire and tornado coverage, we administer that program. It's still a state fund. So those dollars are still with the state. We simply just administer that program through a contract for service with the insurance department. The same way we do with state bonding fund, which is an employee fidelity risk type program. Same concept. We administer that program, but that's still a fund within state government. And we also had a role in the creation of the North Dakota Public Health Insurance Trust. Now, we don't operate that trust. That's a separate organization that's got separate operations. But we do hold a board seat, and then our CFO serves as the treasurer and ex officio board member as well for NDFIT. So we are involved in the governance of NDFIT, but we don't have any operational role. However, like I said, we were instrumental in the creation of NDFIT. We partnered with the North Dakota Southeast Education Cooperative to put that program into place, and we've seen significant growth within that program since its creation. So we're truly your coverage provider. We like to be the source of risk services for North Dakota political subdivisions, including schools, and we think with our portfolio of coverages, we've certainly rounded that out. Now, why do we exist? We were created in 1986 by North Dakota political subdivisions, and I'm going to walk through some history and really kind of an origin of government liability to really color in why the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund exists. But we were, again, formed in 1986 by North Dakota political subdivisions. Today, we serve over 2,550 North Dakota political subdivisions, which we think is about 95% of all political subdivisions within North Dakota. Our premium breakdown, 34% of our premium comes from cities, 30% from counties, 15% from schools, and 22% from other. And that should actually be 33% from cities. Apologize about the typo there. But you can see that premium breakdown. So schools make up a significant portion of the premium that the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund generates. Now, I mentioned I was going to talk through some history with you regarding the origin of the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, and we can actually trace that origin all the way back to England. And of course, we inherited much of the English legal system here in the United States. And back in England, they had a concept called sovereign immunity, where basically it was the king can do no wrong. So you could not hold liable governmental entities, or in this case, the king. And that origin traces back to a decision called Russell versus Menadevon back in 1788. And in that case, the court feared an infinity of actions and no funds to pay damages. And they also put a priority of government over the individual, saying, okay, we can't hold governmental entities liable. They may not have funds to be able to pay those damage awards. And we also don't want to hinder government operations by just having one individual collecting those dollars. Again, that was in England, but in the United States, we actually adopted that concept in 1812. We had a Massachusetts court that relied on that Russell decision and held that an incorporated county in Massachusetts was immune from liability for tortious acts of its employees. That decision in Massachusetts quickly took hold throughout the entire country, and many states started to adopt the concept of sovereign immunity based on that decision in Mower. And so that became law across the United States, and including in North Dakota. And that held true for about 70 years or so. And many states then started to look at sovereign immunity and that concept of saying, gosh, I don't know if that necessarily makes sense. We have maybe a different makeup of government in the United States. We've got governmental entities that have taxing authority. They certainly have dollars that are available to pay claims. And so you saw that concept of sovereign immunity start to erode in North Dakota beginning in the late 1800s. You had 1884, we had a case out of Grand Forks where they awarded damages because of a broken leg caused by poor roadway maintenance against the city of Grand Forks. And we also had a case in 1894, so about 10 years later, holding that counties can certainly be liable as well. And they point out to that Russell decision back in England, and then they just said it's different there than it is here. Again, we've got taxing authority, local governments have an ability to pay claims. And so that concept of sovereign immunity began to erode in the late 1800s. And you saw then moving forward into the 1900s, in 1946, the federal government passed the Federal Tort Claims Act, which waived immunity for some suits. And so you saw many state legislatures as well then kind of look at that and say, gosh, I'm not sure if we want the concept of sovereign immunity to still be in play for all governmental entities. Those cases in the late 1800s were just specific to various instances, but then state legislatures began to identify, gosh, we want to make sure that liability where our governmental entities aren't immune from liability for all different types of lawsuits. And so through the 1950s through the 1980s, states began abolishing sovereign immunity within their borders. And we saw that happen in North Dakota as well. And we can trace that back to a lawsuit involving the Minot Park District, where we had an individual injured and the Minot Park District was held liable. And in that decision, the Supreme Court abolished sovereign immunity for North Dakota local governments, but they actually nudged the legislature and said, hey, we're going to abolish sovereign immunity, but we want the legislature to shape the liability framework for local government in North Dakota. And that's exactly what the North Dakota legislature did in 1975. And so we're going to talk through some of those ways that the legislature has shaped liability for local governments, including school districts, and how that's now come into play for some of the liability coverages that the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund offers. But we can trace our origin for governmental pooling actually to that abolishment of sovereign immunity, where we saw a lot of insurance carriers start to look at government risk a lot differently once governments weren't immune from suit. And we saw in even a Time magazine article, and they had the cover where it says, sorry, America, your insurance has been canceled. We started to see a change within the commercial landscape, including for public entities, where commercial insurers were abandoning local governments. They were saying, we're not going to offer coverage anymore, or we're going to charge such high prices for coverage for governmental entities, including schools, that obtaining coverage is cost prohibitive. And that led to the creation of public entity pooling, which is what the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund is. We're a public entity pool, as I mentioned earlier, we're owned by NDIRF members. And I like to describe the concept of public entity pooling like this. If you're within your neighborhood, you said, you know what, obtaining homeowners insurance or farm insurance or whatever it might be is too expensive, or we can't even find it. Let's create a fund. Everybody within our neighborhood or within a certain area is going to pay into the bank. We're going to have a bank fund, and in the event that we've got claims either for property damage or liability that results, we'll just take money out of that fund, but we'll still be owners of the dollars that are in that fund. And that's exactly what public entity pooling is, and that's exactly what the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund is. Your school districts, when you participate in the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, are simply depositing money with the fund. We are tasked as staff with the reserve fund of administering that fund, and we operate just like a traditional insurance company does. We've got a memorandum of coverage, which is a contract, just like an insurance policy, where we pay claims based on the terms of that memorandum of coverage. And you still, the dollars that are in the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, you still own those dollars. And in times of good years, we actually give money back to our members, like we saw in 2020 and 2021. And so it's really, I think, a beneficial concept in many ways. First off, we don't have to worry about the changes within the commercial landscape and commercial insurance landscape that impact government risk. You've got coverage available in most cases all the time through the reserve fund. And then you're owners of those dollars. When you purchase insurance, the dollars that you use to purchase your insurance go either out of state or even out of the country in most cases. and you never see those dollars again. However, with the reserve fund, again, you're owners of those dollars, and in good years, you get money back, or we participate in many different loss control or training opportunities that we fund through the reserve fund that really help benefit school districts and government risk all the way around in North Dakota. So I had mentioned the liability framework that the North Dakota legislature put into place in 1975. One of the things that they put into place were liability limitations. So they abolished sovereign immunity through that Supreme Court decision in Kiddo, but the legislature said, okay, we understand that sovereign immunity no longer exists, but we think liability should be limited for North Dakota political subdivisions. And I'm going to go through some of those reasons here in a few minutes as to why liability, in the legislature's opinion, should be limited for local governments. But it's under North Dakota Century Code Chapter 32, 12.103. The liability limitations currently exist. It's $375,000 per person and $1 million per occurrence as it sits right now. I've got in a few slides here some changes that will be coming for those limits over the next few years. But it's also important to note that liability limitations exist under North Dakota law. And there's a wide variety of claims that may come under federal law that these liability limitations do not apply to. So what we talk about here with regard to liability limitations are for North Dakota claims under North Dakota law, which is your traditional negligence type actions are generally what we see come under that. Other torts that may come up, those are limited under North Dakota law, but under federal law, you still have, in essence, unlimited liability. Now, there have been some challenges to those liability limitations. So the Supreme Court held there's no longer sovereign immunity available for local governments, and the legislature put into place liability limitations. We have, in many cases, challenges to those liability limitations. The most recent challenge came in 2018, where we saw a significant bus accident arising from a loss in 2015, where we had a bus that was actually struck by a train, and the school district in that case was held liable. And the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, of course, was providing coverage to the school district. And we filed an interpleader with the court, basically saying, okay, we've got liability limitations available, a certain amount of liability available through North Dakota law. We deposited those dollars with the court. And then the folks that were injured in that bus accident actually then said, you know, we think the liability limitations are unconstitutional, whether it's the U.S. Constitution or the North Dakota Constitution. We think those liability limitations are unconstitutional. And that case went all the way to the North Dakota Supreme Court. And in that decision in 2018, the Supreme Court ultimately held that tort caps were constitutional, and the North Dakota legislature can set them at whatever level they deem appropriate for government risk. And the court in that Larimore case cited a few different things as to why liability limitations are necessary for government risk. And in short, they said political subdivisions are required to provide a wide variety of services, many of which aren't available within, the private marketplace, and we're captives to the public's needs. And so to provide all of those services with unlimited risk may not be feasible. They say every dollar siphoned away to pay tort liability or purchase more insurance removes limited resources and tax revenues collected for those specific functions that public political subdivisions are created for. And so they said also that legislature must have had these issues in mind when they set out those liability limitations. And I think this question from that Larimore case really kind of points to the direct issue here. Where is it better to provide unlimited government liability and tort to individual private parties, or is it better to limit that liability in order to curtail, or in order to avoid curtailing services on which the public as a whole depends for its health, safety, and welfare? And I can assure you, we're involved in a lot of those discussions at the legislature regarding liability limitations. And these are the types of things that the legislature really wrestles with, is trying to find that balance where you want to make sure those folks that are harmed are taken care of in an appropriate way, but at the same time, not hindering the opportunities and availability of services through local government. So I mentioned that framework is changing over the next few years. Currently, we're at $375,000 a person and $1 million per occurrence for liability limitations. But moving forward here, effective January 1st of 2023, those dollar amounts will increase. So coming up here will be $406,250 per person and just over $1.6 million per occurrence. Again, those are the liability limits. So if somebody is harmed through tort by a governmental entity, this is what's available for liability of that governmental entity in those cases. And so we craft our coverage documents around that. Again, I also want to point out that these limits are just for claims under North Dakota law. There's other claims that could be made against political subdivisions, including schools. So we feel it's important, given the changes to the liability limitations and also those other claims that may be made under against local governments. We feel you should be reviewing your liability coverage on an annual basis to make sure your liability limits are appropriate. We also, within that statutory framework, have, of course, claims against political subdivisions themselves, but there can be claims made against employees of political subdivisions. And really what they point to ensure that the employee is going to be indemnified or defended by those governmental entities is acting within the scope of employment of that individual's employment with the political subdivision. Were they acting within the scope of their employment, or was it reckless or grossly negligent conduct, willful or wanton misconduct? That would fall outside the coverage through the political subdivision. And of course, tort caps will likely apply. Now, NDIRF coverage picks up both coverage for the NDIRF member, so the school district in your case, but also for your coverage as well. If you're an employee or board member of a school district, NDIRF coverage provides coverage for actions against you in your individual capacity while acting within the scope of your employment or your relationship with the school district. And we'll touch on where that comes into play through NDIRF coverage here in a few minutes, but just some coverage highlights to really elaborate on that background that I provided regarding the liability framework for local governments in North Dakota. NDIRF provides up to $10 million of liability limit. So you can purchase up to $10 million through the NDIRF. As mentioned, you've got the caps that are available under North Dakota law, but that may not come into play in all types of claims. So that's why we offer up to a $10 million limit of liability through the NDIRF liability coverage. There is no aggregate through the reserve funds. You can hit that limit of liability multiple times throughout your coverage period. If that's ending up what happens, there's no aggregate where you max out the amount of coverage available throughout the coverage period. One important note, defense costs are outside the limit of liability. So a lot of times what we see with liability claims, the most important component of NDIRF coverage in those claims is defense. Of course, the attorneys and the amount of time it takes to defend some of these complex liability claims, you start to see the bill creep up fairly quickly. And so we find that our members value that defense component of NDIRF coverage greatly. And as mentioned, that defense is outside the limit of liability. So you're not limited in most cases to the amount of defense available. There are some coverages that we limit defense, but in most cases, that's outside the limit of liability. NDIRF coverage also provides liquor liability. So in the traditional commercial insurance marketplace, you might have had to purchase some separate coverage for liquor liability. We build that right into our program. Same with employment practices liability. Discrimination and harassment are included in the definition of personal injury within our coverage document. So employment practice liability, a lot of times you'll see within the commercial marketplace, if anybody's familiar with that, you'll have to purchase employment practices liability separately. They'll actually exclude it. NDIRF does not exclude it. We include that as part of our program for local governments. So a tremendous benefit included right within our coverage document that everybody that purchases liability coverage through the reserve fund is able to obtain. We also include employee benefits liability. We include special event coverage. We may charge depending on the circumstances of that event, but in some cases in the commercial marketplace, those things would be excluded. We automatically build those in. We also have some pollution coverage for sudden and accidental pollution, which again, in most cases, the commercial marketplace would exclude. Also included in NDIRF coverage are medical payments coverage. So these are payments without regard to fault. We'll just make these payments if there's an issue arising from your operations or your premises. A couple highlights there I want to mention. We provide $2,500 to volunteer personnel while responding to an emergency. This most likely will apply to emergency services organizations like ambulances or firefighting operations, but an important benefit through NDIRF coverage. We also exclude for that no-fault coverage inmates, students, sidewalks, parking lots, and vacant property. Of course, your traditional liability coverage can still come into play, so there's still coverage in those circumstances. We just aren't going to pay for those types of claims without regard to fault. So we'll investigate them. If the school district is liable, there's still liability coverage available under our traditional coverage, but that medical payments component is not available for those. Automobile coverage, some highlights there. No deductible for glass repair. Will include towing coverage, rental reimbursement, and then there's some enhancements available for firefighting and ambulances that I won't touch on here, but we do have some specific coverages for those folks under auto coverage. And then public assets, again, that's your equipment coverage. So those things that are moving from different premises, we include a blanket option. So you don't necessarily need to schedule every single item through the reserve fund. We also have different highlights as well for emergency services. There's some unique characteristics with that risk that we build into those forms. I'm not going to go into that in great detail here in this presentation. I talked about earlier a liability for employees. So again, under the NDIRF coverage, the named member, so your school district is obviously covered by the reserve fund, but elected individuals, employees, or volunteers acting on behalf of the school district are also covered by the NDIRF. We've also got some other folks that might be built in, including any commission, agency, board, district, authority, or similar entity acting on behalf of our NDIRF member is covered under the NDIRF coverage document. Independent contractors are not, however. So sometimes you'll see like snow removal operations where we've got an independent contractor coming in and removing snow. Those folks are not covered by the reserve fund, but a lot of other entities may be able to obtain NDIRF coverage. But most importantly, the named members, so your school district, and also your board members, or if you're a board member, you as well, or volunteers acting on behalf of the school district are all covered by NDIRF coverage. So very broad coverage, trying to pick up all the exposures that you might have, again, under that liability framework that we touched on earlier. So some unique coverages that we offer directly to school districts only. First off would be violent event coverage. I've got a lot of language on this slide. I'm going to break it down piece by piece here in a couple minutes. But I think it's important just to pull right out of the coverage form, what is a violent event, who are affected individuals that are provided coverage under our violent event coverage, and then what types of expenses are paid through that coverage. And again, it's unfortunate that we have this type of coverage available, but I think it showcases the flexibility that we have at the reserve fund to offer coverages that our members or the agents that work with our members request. This is one in particular. We had members and agents that we work with say, hey, we want some sort of coverage in the event that something were to happen on us, we can pick up some of the expenses that are related to that. And that's where this violent event coverage comes into play. Today, we've got about 73% of our school districts that we work with purchase this particular coverage. It's very inexpensive coverage, but it can be very important if unfortunately, something were to happen on your premises. So first off, what is a violent event under this particular coverage? It's an event caused by an intentional act or series of intentional acts involving a physical object, instrument, device, tool, or weapon other than a human body for the purpose of death or injury to affected individuals that result in one or more affected individuals sustaining injury or death on your premises. Now, who are those affected individuals? It's students, employees, volunteers, and anyone else occupying your premises with your permission who sustains an injury or death resulting from that violent event. We do not include perpetrators of that violent event as affected individuals. And if we've got a violent event and we've got affected individuals, we'll pay the response expenses. And that includes first aid or other medical payments, ambulance or other medical transportation, funeral expenses, counseling services for immediate family members of affected individuals. So a fairly broad expense coverage available to a wide range of folks that might be impacted by a violent event. We do have some limits on that particular coverage: $25,000 per person, $250,000 per event, and then a $250,000 aggregate limit for the entire coverage period. So again, $25,000 a person, $250,000 per violent event, and then throughout the entire coverage period, only $250,000 is available under that coverage. Another coverage option available for schools is the IDEA due process hearing coverage. And of course, there's an administrative process that schools might need to go through if a family is challenging some sort of arrangement regarding education. And there's two different options that we offer under this coverage. First, attorney's fees that may be awarded to parents or guardians. We would cover up to $50,000, or the option two, the school district's attorney's fees when responding to this type of incident or this type of allegation, and also the parents or guardian attorney's fees as well. So two different options, one just the parents only, the second option, school district and parents attorney's fees, both are capped at $50,000, but a coverage specific to schools. We also offer cyber related coverage that includes data breach coverage. So in the event that you've got data of students or employees and it's breached, we'll pick up some coverage for notification, consulting services to find out where that breach came from, who was all impacted. And then we'll also pick up some coverage for recipient services. So those folks that their data was breached, we'll pick up that credit monitoring service or other types of related services to help mitigate any issues that somebody might have after the breach of data. Like we've all gotten those letters in the mail where, hey, your data with this company was breached, and you can sign up for credit monitoring for a year under that particular breach letter. We would do a similar thing where we'll look at, okay, who is impacted? Let's go ahead and notify those folks and offer them services to help mitigate any issues that might come up. You've got a $250,000 limit there for breach expense. The reason why we picked $250,000 under North Dakota law, if you can show that your breach response will exceed $250,000, you can revert to methods of notification that will cost you nothing. So that's putting it on your website, notifying local media, and sending an email if you have email addresses for those folks that their data was breached. So we feel that $250,000 limit is appropriate in most cases. We also pick up breach liability coverage for $1 million. So if you're sued because of a data breach, we'll pick up that liability under our data breach coverage up to $1 million. Again, kind of mirroring those liability limitations under North Dakota law. We also have cyber liability coverage up to $1 million under the NDIRF liability memorandum. This might come into play, say you're working with an engineering firm, you're building a new facility, and you send an email over to that engineering firm. They open it up and it infects their system. They come back and sue you saying, hey, you were the cause of a data breach that we had, or some sort of cybersecurity issue that cost us some money. We want you to pay for it. We'll provide up to $1 million under our liability form for those incidents as well. Again, trying to mirror those liability limitations under North Dakota law. Now, one important note, schools can save up to 4% on their liability coverage to the reserve fund by implementing free services offered through NDIT. That includes cyber maturity assessment, network monitoring system, and an internal network scanning service, again, at no cost through ITD. And you can go ahead and implement those services. You'll get a 4% discount on your NDIRF liability coverage. So we certainly encourage you to utilize those services for free and get that discount through the reserve fund. And the reason why we put that into place, we think if you're implementing these services, you're a better risk on the cyber side for NDIRF, so we can offer that discount. So available free services that can get you a discount through the reserve fund. Contact our office or ITD with any questions on that, and they can get you squared away on those services. Now let's dive into 2022 results. We sent out letters here within the last couple of weeks indicating that the NDIRF was not going to be able to provide a conferment of benefits. And here we'll go into some of the reasons why. We had a $17 million written premium in 2022 with $9.2 million in losses. So pretty healthy year for the reserve fund. We actually had an operating profit of over or nearly $2.5 million. So fantastic operating results. Unfortunately, just like many people experienced in 2022, the NDIRF's investment portfolio suffered unrealized investment losses of $5.1 million. Now, I really want to point out those are unrealized. We did not sell those investments in a loss position. We can ride the storm out and see those investment losses disappear over time, but we've got to report those on our financial statement as unrealized losses. So that impacts our ultimate performance, again, showing that $2.7 million in net loss driven by unrealized investment losses that are just, again, shown on our financial statement. That resulted in $22.6 million in members' equity. So still extremely healthy. Our surplus at the reserve fund actually is more than double what our actuarial consultants say we need to obtain their highest confidence that we can provide for our membership. And so we feel like we're in a very conservative, very healthy spot. We just, because of those unrealized investment losses, had to show a $2.7 million net loss in 2022. Again, the conferment of benefits was not declared by our board in 2022 or as a result of 2022 because of those unrealized losses. The board did not want to sell our investments in a loss position in order to pay a conferment. And so they said, let's ride this out. Let's retain those dollars, not sell at a loss position and realize losses. And let's just maintain those in an unrealized loss position rather than declare a conferment. But as mentioned, we had a very healthy year on the operations side, and that results in no rate increase in 2023. Our operations are right where they need to be. We didn't feel like we needed a general rate increase in 2023. And so that just, again, showcases the strength that the reserve fund has, notwithstanding the unrealized investment losses that we saw in 2022. Some claim performance notes. These are school district claims over the past 3 years. 18% of our claims in 2020, 24% in 2021, and 20% in 2022 came from school districts. So kind of holding true to that premium breakout that we saw earlier in the slide, about 15% of our premium comes from schools. Right around that number, we'll see in claim dollar or number of claims that come in each year. And you can see the dollar amounts as well. It's been increasing a little bit. Where we saw 1.2 million in claims in 2020, 2.07 in 2021, and 2.1 million in 2022. We're going to break out a couple different loss areas that we like to highlight for folks that really kind of are areas that we provide services and we feel are most important to pay attention to from a loss control standpoint. First off, auto and in the marine or mobile equipment claims, we see 32% of our overall amount of claims for school districts comes from auto claims. And you see the dollars and the information there on the slide. I'm not going to read it all for you, but a substantial amount of our claim loss comes from auto claims. When you look at school district information, same thing held true in 2021, where we saw 33% of our overall claim dollars coming from auto claims. Same thing held true in 2022. And I've got highlighted here on that slide, 48% now in 2022 came from auto and mobile equipment claims. So something certainly to keep in mind. If we can reduce our auto claims, that really benefits the reserve fund. That takes away a lot of the dollars that we end up paying out. And we'll touch on some of the resources and tools that we have available at the reserve fund to help with that. But these numbers really kind of showcase the reasons why we push so hard on the loss control side with regard to auto claims. Now, our 5-year look back, we had over 1,400 auto claims over the last 5 years. And you can see those trends where over $500,000 in accident claims, $340,000 in stationary objects, and $410,000 with collision with stationary objects. Those are all things that we feel are very preventable. Even though the cost per claim might be a little bit low, the total amount incurred there, if you look at that slide, is $3.5 million over the last 5 years. So they add up very quickly with regard to these auto claims. And again, most of these are preventable accidents. And so we help in a wide variety of ways, but kind of pointing out a couple in particular here. Defensive driving courses. These are free of charge. They're the National Safety Council courses. So you can obtain a certificate, which will get you individually point reductions on your license, maybe some insurance discounts through your insurance provider. But we feel here at the Reserve Fund really helps reduce our losses as well. So again, free of charge, we'll come out on site. So you want us to come out on site and provide training to bus drivers as an example, which is a required training. We can come out on site, do that for free. with a National Safety Council certified course. We also have the online version free of charge. If you want to look into that for your folks as well. The nice thing, obviously, with online, we don't have to worry about scheduling, and folks can take it at a time that works best for them. But again, free defensive driving courses. We also have some online training through our training platform called Local GovU, which if you go to NDIRF.com and click the training button right on the home screen there, you'll get taken right to our training platform. All of the courses that are out there are free. We have some auto-related courses, but there's a whole wide variety of different types of courses, including training on sexual harassment, training on discrimination, training on various hot button issues within local government. That's all available free of charge at Local GovU at NDIRF.com, and then clicking that training button. We actually utilize that, and we see a lot of our members utilize it as well for consistent annual training for their employees. So it's all documented. We'll assign courses to our staff. Other members that we've got within our NDIRF membership will do the same. They'll assign courses to their employees to complete within that Local GovU platform. You can print off certificates. You can retain documentation within the platform of the training. So in the event there is a claim made against you, say for harassment, you can go back and say, you know, we train on this annually, and here's the documentation of doing that. Like I said, we utilize it for our staff. And we see a lot of our NDIRF members do the same. We encourage all school districts to take advantage of that free of charge training that really helps put you in a defensible spot in the event a claim is made against you. So we talked about auto claims. Let's touch on some employment claims as well. Now, these claims you'll see generally can be low dollar amounts. You saw in 2020 or 2021, $1,600 or $1,700 per claim. One thing I will say though, with employment claims, they're not a lot of fun to handle, and they're not a lot of fun at the school district level. If you get one of these in, it's just they can get very messy very quickly, and so we like to avoid them altogether if possible, for the sake of our membership and for the sake of the NDIRF as well. So you see some low dollar amounts here in 2020 and 2021. However, in 2022 we saw some significant activity where one wage dispute actually came in with $42,000 of loss on that particular claim. The average cost per claim in 2022 jumped 15-fold, nearly 15, well, about 10-fold from what we saw in 2020 and 2021, just as a result of some higher dollar amount claims. Again, you might see one where there's just not a lot of activity. We're in a very defensible spot, but these things can get out of hand quickly, or they're just a pain to handle. So we certainly encourage you to take advantage of some of the services that we'll touch on here in a couple slides. Now, a 5-year overview, 5-year look back, about annually, we'll see about $65,000 of loss. But again, these things can be very expensive very quickly just on one particular claim. The 5-year trend, you also see down below, we had a wide variety of claims, whether it's contractual issues, wage disputes, or just complaints to the Department of Labor or EEOC complaints, where you've got to go through an administrative process initially. The NDIRF can come in and help you through that process in the event of one of these claims. And I just can't say that's enough. While the dollar amounts might be low for the last few years, we've seen some of our largest claims at the Reserve Fund come from employment-related actions. And I can assure you those members that had to go through that will tell you that was probably one of the worst few moments of their careers as well, having to figure out how to defend, whether it's responding to a Department of Labor complaint or actually going through litigation and being deposed. I mean, they can turn into a mess very quickly for all involved. So we encourage you to take advantage of some of the services that we've got available through the North Dakota Insurance Reserve Fund, and certainly take advantage of the services that the School Board Association has available for you as well. Through the Reserve Fund, we took over administration of the HR Collaborative earlier this year. And so within the HR Collaborative, if you're not familiar with it, it's a resource for all local governments in North Dakota, which provides HR training and HR assistance, including an HR reference guide that's available on NDIRF.com. And it'll walk you through various things that a local government, including a school district, might face when it comes to HR related matters, whether it's job descriptions or terminating an individual or hiring an individual. A lot of different things are included in that HR reference guide. That's updated every couple of years, once there's legislative changes, we'll go through and skim through to make sure we've got relevant information in there. Certainly take advantage of that reference guide. We also hold various training opportunities through the HR Collaborative. The summer virtual series, which will be coming up here this year, we've got a handful of webinars that we'll be rolling out that are very low cost with a lot of high expertise included in those webinars. So we certainly ask you to take advantage of those HR Collaborative webinars. First one will be held on June 7th. More information will be coming out from us and from our various partners, including the School Board Association, on those webinars. We also have a conference every 2 years that's solely focused on government HR in North Dakota. And so those dates have been set for 2024, April 17th and 18th here in Bismarck. So put those on the calendar. Make sure you attend that conference. It's usually very well attended, and we get very high remarks with responses from our attendees that go to it. So take advantage of our HR services and also on LocalGovU, that online training platform. We have a lot of HR related resources available for school districts as well. So as mentioned, we want to put you in the best possible defensible position in the event that you have an allegation of harassment or discrimination or whatever it might be with regard to employment. So taking advantage of these resources will certainly help do that. So shifting gears a little bit with regard to coverage. Yes.
I apologize for interrupting, but we had a question come through here.
Sure.
So the question is, we have used ND Safety Council for defensive driving courses and they were not free. Is there something we need to do differently to get them for free?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. Contact our office. If you go through our office, you can get them free of charge. And so we've got folks on staff that will come out and provide the training for you. Or we actually contract with the Safety Council. In some cases, we'll use their staff, but we'll still pick up the tab for those defensive driving courses. And so if you go through our office, if you call us 701-224-1988, again, 701-224-1988, give us a call and we'll help you, get those free of charge, whether it's our training that we provide or working through the Safety Council. The NDIRF is happy to pick up the tab on those. I've also will include at the end of this presentation our member services manager's contact information. You can contact him directly as well. His name is Corey Olson, and we'll get his email address out to you here in a few slides. And simply just reach out to us, say, hey, we want to schedule defensive driving. We'll coordinate it all with you. We'll get somebody out to do the training and we'll pick up the tab. So as mentioned, shifting gears here a little bit. I know we've got just a few minutes left here. We'll talk about some fire and tornado claim information. But I wanted just to back up and explain our process with regard to the Fire and Tornado Fund. As mentioned, we took over administration of this fund in 2019. It's still a state fund, so those dollars are still held within the state, and it had traditionally been administered by the insurance department. But in 2018, I was actually contacted by the commissioner, the insurance commissioner, saying, hey, we want to make some changes within the department. Would you guys be interested in taking on administration of the Fire and Tornado Fund? We spent the next 8-10 months looking under every stone and looking at everything that we could to figure out a way that it wouldn't make sense for us to take over administration. We couldn't figure out a way that it wouldn't make sense. And so we asked the legislature in 2019 to turn the reins over on the administrative side to the reserve fund, and they agreed. And so we took over again June 2019. And we undertook a 3-year transition process where you hopefully have seen this kind of all take shape over the last few years, where that first year, we really just kind of wanted to get our arms around what the operation and the processes were going to be with regard to the Fire and Tornado Fund. Shortly thereafter, we started making some immediate changes, whether it was valuations or making changes to the coverage form or even rating changes. And we felt then after year 2, year 3, we started to see that Fire and Tornado Fund product looked like an NDIRF product. So those NDIRF lines of coverage that you've traditionally held, we like to think the Fire and Tornado Fund is starting to look and feel like an NDIRF product. Our goal by the end of 2025 is to have every property within the Fire and Tornado Fund, over nearly 12,000 properties within the Fire and Tornado Fund. We're going to have some sort of review on those, whether it's a desk review that we've done in-house or getting our staff out and taking a look at those properties Because one significant issue that we've seen with fire and tornado fund coverage is property valuations. So if you've got, say, replacement cost coverage on your school building, making sure that that limit of coverage on your policy is going to be adequate to replace your school building in the event of loss. And so we can get out on site and take a look at those properties for you and make sure that those limits are adequate. Because the last thing we want when we're administering this program is to have a loss on your school site and for us to come back and say, you know what, our limit of insurance isn't adequate. Here's all that we can provide. And then you're left holding the bag. We want to make sure everybody is on the same page saying, okay, here's the valuation that's most appropriate. This is going to take care of you in the event of a loss. And so we can get out on site and help get that valuation to a point where everybody's comfortable with that. Now, with regard to claim information, schools accounted for about 26% of the fire and tornado fund claims in 2022. Kind of over a 5-year time frame. Here are some of the most prevalent types of claims that we see come in for the fire and tornado fund. Wind and hail and water are really the two primary drivers of claims for the fire and tornado fund with regard to schools. In 2022, in particular, we saw a lot of water related losses. And we saw primarily weather related water losses. So maybe freezing of pipes causes a significant water event in a school building. Those can be expensive to remediate and get that building back to the way it was before. And so we saw an uptick in 2022. Just asked to make sure that we're not leaving windows open or areas where cold weather could get in and freeze pipes. We're making sure we take advantage of different ways to prevent those types of losses. If you've got questions on those types of issues, give our office a call. We're more than happy to help out on the loss control side there. We have some fire and tornado fund endorsements that we like to make sure everybody's aware of that are different from what's been traditionally offered by the fire and tornado fund. So these are coverage enhancements that we've put into place over the last couple of years. First off, we'll offer a blanket limit of coverage. So you'll have one limit for all of your buildings. And you can have a wide variety of buildings that are on there. One caveat there is we want to make sure that we've gone out and valued those buildings appropriately before we'll offer a blanket limit of coverage. So if your school hasn't had us come on site to take a look at your valuations, give our office a call. We can get out there and take a look at that to make sure they're adequately protected. But then you've got some coverage enhancements that might be available to you as well in the event you take advantage of our evaluation services. We also offer a wind hail per building deductible removal endorsement. So under the traditional coverage form for the fire and tornado fund, in the event of a wind or hail loss, each building is going to have a deductible. We'll take that away through this endorsement where you'll just have one deductible in the event of a wind or hail loss. So very important for those folks that have multiple buildings in one location. We'll also offer an endorsement to increase sewer backup coverage to $25,000. And then we'll also add debris removal coverage, increase limits up to $500,000 for debris removal per building. And so when you have a loss, it's of course, we've got the fire, we've got to get that building, we've got to get that debris removed out there before we can replace it. And that bill can add up very quickly depending on a lot of different circumstances. So we offer an endorsement to increase that deductible or debris removal coverage. And we encourage you to take advantage of that for your larger buildings. And it's very, very cheap. So some of the most cost-effective coverage that you can buy through the fire and tornado fund is that per building debris removal limit, increasing that, making sure that not only is your building adequately valued to replace it, but we've got enough money in the policy to take everything away after a loss as well. Also, and traditionally, the fire and tornado fund has offered this, but we like to point this out, that the fund offers equipment breakdown coverage. So it's repair, replacement, and costs associated with unexpected mechanical, electrical pressure failure caused by a breakdown. And what we tend to see are even school districts doubling up on coverage here. So you'll buy it through the fire and tornado fund, and then you might buy a separate policy through a different carrier. What we're saying is look at the fire and tornado fund option before you start exploring other options. We feel ours is best in class, best in the marketplace for equipment breakdown. And so well worth your time to purchase it. And our coverage is the most cost effective within the marketplace as well. So if your school doesn't have equipment breakdown, or you're even purchasing it elsewhere, take a look at the Fire and Tornado Fund option. So I've harped on quite a few times the different member services that are available for Fire and Tornado Fund members. The property valuation service is by far the most important. Getting somebody on site, taking a look at those valuations, so we can make sure that you're adequately covered in the event of a loss. We can come out also and take a risk assessment survey. So if you're concerned about pipes freezing or maybe an electrical issue, and you want some guidance on how to make sure that we're not going to have a loss as a result of that issue, give our office a call. We're more than happy to come out on site, both do evaluation and a risk assessment if we need to really help our membership avoid those types of losses. We also like to throw in the Certified Playground Safety Inspector course, which can fall under Fire and Tornado Fund, also under liability as well. We have some scholarship dollars available. It's offered through the North Dakota Park and Recreation Association that they'll do a course where you can come in free of charge for an NDIRF member. We'll get that scholarship for you, and you can come in and take that course, making sure that your playground equipment is where it needs to be, both to avoid liability losses and to avoid the property losses as well. So that wraps up my time here with you today. I appreciate everybody attending today and giving us an opportunity to run through who the NDIRF is, what our coverage looks like, and some claims examples and services that might be available to those school districts that are members. And again, most everybody here on the call today would certainly fit that bill. So if you've got any questions for us, I've got our email information here. Again, our phone number is 701-224-1988. If you want to give us a call, but certainly feel free to shoot us an email. We've got Jeff Tesher, our Director of Underwriting, Keith Peach, our Director of Claims, and Corey Olson, Director of Member Services. Corey's the guy to call for defensive driving courses. So if you want to utilize the NDIRF discount, or again, free of charge, whether it's our staff or the Safety Council, shoot Corey an email. We're more than happy to get out, provide that service for you, or get you set up on our online platform as well. So thanks, everybody. Lexi, I'll turn it back over to you to wrap things up, or if there are any questions.
Thanks, Brennan. I am seeing one other question here. The question says, according to the North Dakota Attorney General opinions, a political subdivision does not have the express or implied authority to contractually agree to limit the liability of a vendor. Most contracts contain limitation of liability and indemnity provisions. According to the AG, political subdivisions cannot agree to these provisions, which makes negotiating contracts incredibly difficult in some instances. So the question is, have there been any discussions about modifying North Dakota Century Code 32-12.1 to mimic the language in 32-12.2, which authorizes the state to limit certain liabilities up to specified amounts?
Thank you for the question. That's an important discussion. We've not had any conversations from a legislative standpoint. We're certainly aware of the limitations that are under North Dakota law, whether it's your ability to work with vendors on their liability limits, or I think most importantly for the reserve fund, we feel that under state law, political subdivisions cannot indemnify a third party. There isn't any statutory authority that authorizes that either. And so that really kind of puts you in a tough spot where you're working with vendors. They may want some sort of indemnification, and we feel indemnification isn't authorized under North Dakota law. Our coverage form still provides coverage for those instances if under North Dakota law you can do it. Of course, if you can't under North Dakota law, then it's void anyways. But in the event that it's determined that North Dakota law allows you to indemnify a third party, NDIRF coverage could kick in if there's like a tort claim resulting from that you've got to indemnify and defend a third party. But an important discussion and something we're continuing to look at, and I appreciate you bringing that up. As we look at even the 2025 session, that might make some sense for us to figure out a way that helps not only schools, but we see it across the board, whether it's a county, a city, townships even. When they're entering into contracts, sometimes there's some indemnification language in those agreements, and it puts everybody in kind of a tough spot. On the flip side, we'd certainly encourage you to negotiate with those vendors and figure out ways to work through that. Because sometimes it's inverse, where you've got the leverage to negotiate, saying, hey, no, we're not going to indemnify you. You should indemnify us if there's a loss. So we certainly would encourage you to look at that as well. Give me a call, shoot me an email if you want to have a more in-depth conversation, because there's a lot of little intricacies on this particular issue. And we've done a lot of work on this in the past. We just not have had the discussion at the legislative level to clarify who can and cannot do these types of things. So really appreciate the question, and shoot me an email, give me a call. I'm more than happy to have a more in-depth conversation on this topic.
Great. Thank you for that answer, Brennan. And thank you all for joining us today. I don't see any other questions that have popped up. A big thank you to Brennan for being with us this morning. Please feel free to contact him with further information. You can see you have some emails here, but you can also access his contact info on our website, as well as the recording of the presentation today on the events page under the Brunch and Learn webinar series. You'll see that come up within a few days. Our next Brunch and Learn is scheduled for April 19th with Chad Roberts from TFFR on their department updates and coverage overview. You can access more information about our Brunch and Learn on our website on the events page. But with that, that's all we have for you guys today. So we're going to wrap it up and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you.